Study section 5. Animal learning. 1. Habituation. Introduction. In this study section, we will consider a form of learning known as habituation and also see how it is used by animal trainers to train dogs. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to define learning, define habituation, point out the importance of habituation, highlight the effectiveness of habituation, point out spontaneous recovery. Learning. Learning is a characteristic feature of living beings, animals included. The most popular definition describes learning as a more or less permanent change in the behavior of an organism as a result of interaction with the environment. This definition distinguishes learning-based behavior change, which is a deliberate and conscious effort to imbibe something new, from short-term behavior changes such as sensitization, fatigue, and sensory adaptation. Consequently, only changes that have long-lasting effects and are a result of deliberate effort can be referred to as learning. Habituation. Habituation is an extremely simple form of learning in which an animal, after exposure to a stimulus, stops responding to subsequent exposures to the stimulus. That is, habituation describes a type of learning in which there is a gradual decrease in responsiveness to a stimulus as a result of repeated exposure to that stimulus. This happens as sensory systems in the brain stop sending signal to the brain in response to a continuously present or frequently repeated stimulus. Cohen et al. 1997. For example, the first time a dog hears a door slam, it may startle in response to the slam sound. However, when it hears the same slam over and again, it will gradually startle less and less until finally it exhibits little or no startling response to the sound. The dog is said to have habituated, become used to the sound from the point when it no longer startles to the door slam. Importance of habituation. Habituation is considered very important, particularly because it enables animals to filter the large amount of information received from the surrounding environment. Animals, like humans, are exposed to a large amount of stimuli daily as they go about their daily activities in their environments. But not all of these stimuli are important to the survival of the organism. Therefore, it becomes necessary that the animal should discriminate between stimuli in their order of importance so that it does not expend energy in an attempt to get used to all stimuli. By habituating to less important signals, an animal can focus its attention. But not all of these stimuli are important to the survival of the organism. Therefore, it becomes necessary that the animal should discriminate between stimuli in their order of importance so that it does not expend energy in an attempt to get used to all stimuli. By habituating to less important signals, an animal can focus its attention on the most important features of its environment, which has direct relevance on its survival. Viewed in this sense, habituation may be considered adaptive because it allows animals to save their attention for more important stimuli in the environment. A good example of this is seen among species that rely on alarm calls to convey information about the presence of predators within their territory. After a while, the animals stop giving alarm calls when they become familiar with other species in their environment that turn out not to be predators. In this case, habituation is an important component of not crying wolf when non-threatening animals come close. Humans have also habituated to a number of stimuli in the environment. For instance, people living near military barracks have got used to gunshot sounds and no longer get frightened when they hear gunshots, unlike individuals who live far from barracks, who are easily frightened at gunshot sounds. Dog trainers also make use of the principle of habituation to train dogs to increase their attention span to important components of the environment during training sections. Is habituation effective? People keep wondering whether habituation as a form of learning is actually effective. But when properly applied, habituation has been shown to improve effectiveness, particularly among dogs during training sections. Dogs, like other animals, are normally frightened of or interested in things that are new to them. Detector dogs, for instance, are expected to carry out their duties in environments that feature very distracting and sometimes intense stimuli, such as loud explosions. Through habituation, a working dog can be taught to learn to respond minimally to irrelevant stimuli and pay attention to the task at hand. For example, a detection dog trained in completely quiet, secluded environment devoid of human activity may initially have difficulty concentrating on a search task when commanded to evacuate a building with people inside it, e.g., a classroom full of students. However, once the dog is exposed to performing search tasks in environments full of people, its ability to concentrate on specific tasks will improve even in the presence of people. That is, at this time, the dog is no longer distracted by the presence of people in the environment and is able to do the tasks better. Let us consider the following facts about habituation. Firstly, habituation as a form of learning proceeds at different rates in animals, but it is most effective and rapid with stimuli that are mild or moderate. However, it can be very difficult to produce habituation to intense or frightening stimuli. A fearful dog exposed repeatedly to a very intense stimulus, such as running car engine at close range, is likely to respond more intensely to this type of stimulus in the future instead of less intensely. Secondly, habituation is most efficient when the stimulus exposures and training sections are well separated in time. For example, a dog habituates more easily to gunshots when they are spaced out at intervals of 15 or 20 seconds, and when the training sections are separated by 24 hours. The opposite procedure, which entails exposing the dog to rapid series of gunshots several times a day, may lead to increased fear of the noise. Thirdly, habituation can be accelerated by pairing a strong pleasant stimulus with another stimulus, such as fear-inducing stimulus. To again use the previous example, if the dog is frightened of a running car engine, its fear can be offset by presenting it with a strong pleasant stimulus like food. This procedure is called counter-conditioning and should be combined with the use of hierarchies of intensity. This is because if the dog is very afraid of the car engine, it will ignore the food when it is close to the engine because it will be too afraid to eat. Therefore, counter-conditioning is conducted at distances progressively closer and closer to the engine, beginning initially at a distance sufficient enough to allow the dog's anxiety to be easily offset by pleasure are being presented with food. At each stage of the hierarchy, i.e., distance from the car engine, it is essential that the trainer uses the dog's behavior as a measure of when to proceed to the next stage, so that counter conditioning proceeds at a pace suited to the individual dog. Spontaneous recovery. That an animal has become habituated to a particular stimulus does not mean that it can no longer respond to a sudden encounter to the same stimulus in the future. Fear responses, for instance, are very durable and persistent, and can re-emerge even after extensive habituation has taken place. This is because habituation includes certain short-term processes that tend to wear off after a few minutes or hours, and it is normal for a habituated response to reappear to some extent between training sections. Thus, a dog may exhibit no fear of a stimulus by the end of one day's training section, yet show recovered fear at the beginning of the next section. This phenomenon is called spontaneous recovery. For example, a dog habituated to a loud noise, such as that from a blender, may display some fear the next time it encounters the blender. It is important to understand that even when habituation and counter conditioning are correctly applied, the fear response will often re-emerge. However, from section to section, there should be less and less spontaneous recovery of the fear response. At this point, it is important to state that habituation may actually decrease rather than increase an organism's effectiveness, because effective performance depends upon a certain level of interest in and responsiveness to environmental stimuli. A dog that is relatively new to detection work, for example, may deliver very intensive and focused search behavior because it is stimulated and excited by the new learning situation. But after more experience, the dog may become sluggish and appear bored from work overload or from performing routine job. To prevent this from happening, it is advisable that varieties be introduced into the dog's daily routine. To achieve this, a detector dog should be trained in as many different locations as possible, and a variety of different reward objects and games should be used as reinforcers. Blue balls. Learning is a more or less permanent change in the behavior of an organism as a result of interaction with the environment. Habituation is a form of learning in which an animal, after exposure to a stimulus, stops responding to subsequent exposures to the stimulus. Spontaneous recovery is the reappearance of a response, in bracket, a conditioned response, that has been extinguished. The recovery can occur after a period of non-exposure to the conditioned stimulus. It is called spontaneous because the response seems to reappear out of nowhere. Summary. In this study section, we discussed the concept of learning. We went further to examine the importance and effectiveness of habituation, a form of learning in which an animal, after exposure to a stimulus, stops responding to subsequent exposures to the stimulus. We close the section with an exploration of spontaneous recovery. End of study section 5. Thanks for listening.